Jaunty! Indeed.
Good day, chaps and chapettes, and welcome to a jaunty discussion of video games and the like. Today, in our inaugural episode, we shall discuss a topic we call the empty sandbox, and its relation to gaming. Initially, we shall discuss precisely what we mean by our topic, then we shall discuss how this type of game came to be, as well as how these games continue to be made despite their abhorrent nature. Our final point of discussion shall be to relay some utterly despicable examples of this phenomenon, and perhaps several counter-examples. We hope you enjoy our jaunty discussion as it unfolds. Okay.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's supposed to be funny.
Yeah. Just sitting here trying not to laugh is the hardest thing I've done all day,
Yeah.
so...
In case anyone thought that that was actually how I was going to talk for this entire episode. Hold on, I'm gonna be mad that our air conditioning just turned on. Which, I apologize if this part of the video sounds weird. I'm gonna have to do a noise reduction, which usually f***s with the quality. Mad. I already broke the rules. That's okay.
We'll just have to keep up the rest of the episode.
Yeah. That's okay. This is more or less just getting into the swing of things. I'm trying to remember where I put the notes. I call it show notes. It's really not show notes, guys. I have to write show notes later, actually, secretly, while I'm editing. So, I'm not gonna lie, we straight up decided to steal this concept from Jim Sterling.
Thank you, Mr. Sterling.
Yes, thank God for him. I've been watching his videos for a long time, and I know he does a podcast, and he also does a show about video games, and I decided that he had a good point. Also, we have like a list of 20 or so topics, and we decided that this one was the easiest to start with.
I mean, the other ones we can't even do because
Yeah,
too much preparation.
we have a bunch of things that we need to do quote-unquote research on. One of our topics coming up is difficulty, and one of my major points for difficulty in gaming is Dark Souls, which Alex has yet to play. Anything you want to say before we start with our talking points?
I got nothing.
Okay, good. I'm going to take a sip of water, and then we'll get right into it. Delicious dihydrogen monoxide. I'm stalling until 5 minutes. Aha! The air conditioning went off. Alright, so our first point of talking today is quote-unquote content, which is, of course, the boring,
Repetitive mission
tedious,
after mission.
Yeah, that has no real variation in it, and so it gets boring, but you still have to do it to, like, get everything in your sandbox games.
Otherwise known as the side missions.
Well, yeah.
Mostly.
And of course, the big point here is that most of the side mission type things in sandbox games these days are boring and unfun. But these games keep getting made, which is really what I want to talk about here. Because obviously they wouldn't make them if they didn't sell.
Right.
Except sometimes they do, but that's a topic for another day. In fact, I'm going to write that down after this. So, like, let's talk about a couple of these missions. Do you have any specific ones you want to mention?
The ones that come to mind right now are from Saints Row 4, and they're the fraud missions, where basically you ragdoll yourself all over the place.
I mean, I always had fun with those, but, I mean, you're kind of right. They are boring after a while.
Yeah, because it's not that they're boring for me sometimes, it's just that it's painstakingly how often you have to throw yourself in front of these cars.
That's true.
Just to rank up the points to at least get bronze.
Yeah.
For someone like me, the first time doing the game, it's like, what is this?
See, and actually, Saints Row is pretty bad about their side missions, because I can only think of 2 that are memorable, but I know there's 12. I don't know. See, I was thinking of the one where you spray poop on stuff.
Oh, the sewage mission.
Yeah.
In
And then
2.
insurance fraud, which is actually my favorite, even though, yes, it's a little tedious if you're not ready to rack up that many points. And then Fight Club, of course. But I can't think of any others that stood out. Can you?
No, not really.
Yeah.
Unless they're a mission that you have to go find a certain object, which I think there's only one that I know of.
See, but I think that's a story mission.
No,
it might be.
Not Dying Light, no.
Oh.
No, binoculars, you have to specifically go look for a pair of binoculars.
See, but that's different. That's like a Easter egg item, like EXP Caliber. Also, we suddenly transitioned into Dying Light. I was still talking about Saints Row, but...
I'm sorry, you can go back to Saints Row.
It's okay.
No,
it's fine. See, the whole point is to discuss multiple games, and I've been focusing. See, and then that gets pretty well into my next point of, if all these missions are boring, then why do we still play these games? And why do developers keep making them?
Probably because the developers do see, like, oh, they like these types of missions, so let's put X amount of missions in this game.
That's true.
I mean, it's almost like, do this thing, question marks, profit.
Yeah. And another thing that I've heard a lot is that they're becoming easier to make, these open world sandbox games. So, if you remember, for a time, every game was like a shooter. And that's because you could just make a shooter in a couple of minutes, which is still pretty true. Ubisoft didn't make that many shooters back in the day.
Or am I thinking of Infinity Ward, Call of Duty?
I mean, we'll talk about Activision some other time.
Oh, it's that one. Okay, my bad.
Yeah. No,
I'm sorry.
But like, just like every movie tie-in game, which of course this is going into the topic that I want to talk about later, which is shovelware. And we're not going to discuss it today. But just every shovelware game used to be a shooter, and now they're all sandboxes. And it's because they go for whatever is the quickest and biggest bang for the buck that they can produce. Even just looking at our games, Shadow of Mordor is an open world sandbox for no reason.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you probably enjoyed the game more than I did.
Well, I haven't gotten through all of it, but...
Yeah, that's true. See, and I think it gets better halfway through, and I don't think that that's good. Well, I say halfway. So, another big thing in these sandbox games is that they'll have 2 maps, and your first 2 acts will take place in the first half of the map, and then you'll go to the second half for the third act. And that's what Shadow of Mordor does. But you don't unlock the most interesting power in the entire game until you get to the second map. It makes the game so much more fun for me, and I don't know why they would restrict it like that.
I mean, the only reason why I haven't gotten that far is because I'm mainly a console player, and all the console versions I've played have all paused in the exact same spot of the exact same mission.
Well, yeah.
Which
we could talk about consoles some other time.
Pisses me off.
Yeah.
I would say to no end, but no, there are
speaking
things
of
worse.
games that freeze a lot, we have one of those coming up in this discussion. So, how'd we get to these big empty sandboxes? Because if you think back, sandbox games used to have to be very entertaining to make it.
Really?
Like, I mean, if you think about... I think the first Assassin's Creed was fairly...
painful.
Really? I mean, I guess I haven't played it in years.
When you go back to play that one after playing the others, like the Ezio trilogy, that one is painful to play.
Yeah.
Even before I played them, actually, I found it kind of painful.
Okay, so I think what I'm remembering is just like the original set of Assassin's Creeds, though, where they actually had to make everything entertaining to keep the player engaged.
Yeah.
But nowadays, they don't have to do that anymore. They can just have you liberate the districts, which is a whole big topic that I want to talk about here in a minute. But
only ones I've really noticed that have been Unity.
Pretty much just every Ubisoft game in the past, 5 years.
So, after Black Flag.
Yeah.
Well,
Black Flag had it too. You did the same set of missions in every city, and then eventually it became liberated.
yeah, but then there was also... You could also unfog parts of the overall map by taking out fortresses, so...
Which, again, got tedious very quickly. See,
yeah.
and that's exactly what we're talking about here, is just things that are the same mission over and over for no apparent reason. I don't know.
I think another one you said is terrible at this is the Infamous series.
Yeah, and, I mean, obviously, it's been over a year since I've played Infamous, but you just beat both of them a couple weeks ago. So you have more to talk about Infamous.
Yeah. Yes, they were among the first, not the first that I ever played, but they probably were the first sandboxes I played, and going back and replaying them, I still find that they're enjoyable, but
But the dead drops, though.
Okay, to be honest, the first one is just terrible with
I forget, how many dead drops are there?
32 in the first one, 29 in the second one, and in Second Son, I don't care.
Sorry, I keep derailing the conversation.
We stopped at me talking about Infamous, and then you were talking about the dead drops, which are tedious in the first one. Second one, you can choose to... Well,
they're slightly more manageable, yeah.
Slightly, yes.
Also...
But harder to find because the frickin'
Let's talk about the upgrade shards that...
Oh, jeez.
There's no good way of finding all of them until after you've already beaten the game.
Yeah.
And see, this is the thing that I hate the most in sandbox games like this, where you don't get the ability to get all of your skills until you've already beaten the final boss.
Second Son, actually, you can get all your abilities before you beat the final boss.
Well, yeah, and technically you can in Infamous 1 and 2.
That's
but
if you're diehard
if you're a literal psychopath and you want to go hunt down every single blast shard.
Not me. Definitely not Gerard the completionist.
I mean,
he would just to complete
presumably he waited until afterward, but I don't know. I would have to rewatch the videos. I think you did.
Anyway.
But, shout out to @JCompletion if you're watching this. Wow. Please comment. I'm gonna cry.
I mean, any other sandbox that you can think of, aside from the one that is inevitably going to come up?
Oh, man. Yes, there are lots of sandbox games I can talk about.
Alright, then.
I mean, we could just go ahead and list off everything Ubisoft has made in the past couple of years. Because, as one of our topics for later on we'll discuss, they are just huge perpetrators of...
Developer saturation?
Developer saturation, thank you. I forgot what I titled it. Which, of course, is when a developer just makes one thing. Yes, and that's what Ubisoft has done with sandbox games. And in order to be able to make them that quickly, they've had to just put nothing in them. Just looking at our shelf of games here, we have Far Cry 4, which is Far Cry 3, except with more nebulous content that does nothing for the game. Or there's The Division, which is...
The Division?
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, I paid less than $10 for it, so I'm fine.
We have Black Flag, we have Syndicate.
Oh, yeah. We have like 4 copies of Black Flag in this room.
It's... it's hilarious.
You know what's bad?
Oh, Just Cause 3 is
I originally said that as a joke, and I think there are actually 4 copies in this room.
Well, there's...
we don't need to... Oh, shoot. Yeah, Just Cause. Which actually is a pretty good example of how sandboxes should be, which I guess leads us into examples. So, the reason I like Just Cause 3 is that despite the fact that it has a bunch of repetitive missions, at least you're blowing things up, which
Lovely explosions!
Which makes it a little bit more entertaining.
See how much you can blow up with one thing.
Yeah, my favorite is to sneak into enemy territory and then plant all of my explosives and set up all of my ties and then throw all of my grenades and then reveal myself to the enemy. And it's always very entertaining to watch their reaction. But despite all that, I did get pretty bored with Just Cause 3 because, like we said earlier, it is just a lot of content that doesn't really go anywhere. See, and I think the biggest problem with this overwhelming amount of Sandbox games is that it's almost been the death of the linear story. Again, looking at our game collection, and this is just for the PS4. I don't have open my Steam library, which also has a ton of games, but looking at these, there's only a few that are linear stories that have come out recently. So looking at our recent games, which is why I wanted to look at the PS4, many of them are sandboxes, and the ones that are not are older. So, like, actually, that's not entirely true, because we have 3 of the Souls games for PS4. And, of course, the Souls games, which we'll be talking about a lot in this series, are some of my favorites. And they, of course, have a linear story, but it's a very sprawling world. Well, I guess it's not a linear story. It's not really a story at all. The story is completely ambient, but I'll just save my discussion of the Souls games for a later date. But then we have things like Deus Ex, and Far Cry and Just Cause, and Infamous, and of course Watch_Dogs. And these are all just sandbox games for the purpose of being sandbox games. I'm trying to think of memorable missions from any of those games. Oh, that's right. Just Cause had the one where I crashed a boat into the shore. Can't remember why, or how I got on the boat, or even what I was supposed to be doing. All I remember is that I crashed into the shore.
The note of a memorable mission is when you cannot remember what you were doing it for.
Yeah. So, like, I don't remember the context it had in the story, or why I would want to be playing this mission. And that's kind of the whole thing here, is just, there is nothing in these games, for the most part. Alright, sorry about that. I got a phone call, and then we got derailed for, like, 5 whole minutes. Wow. So we were talking about the death of linear stories, and again, we were looking at our recent games, and the only 2 I can think of that have linear stories on there are Doom.
Does Doom even have a story?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're playing through consecutive levels, so
yeah.
I consider that a story, whether it really is or not.
Yeah.
But then
it's a good
we have Shovel Knight, which, of course, is also level-based and stuff. Yeah, the rest of them, I mean, yes, they have... Yes, we also have Wind Waker HD. Thank you. Also, thank Nintendo for that existing. We're going to be talking about Nintendo a lot in the upcoming weeks as well. I don't know, we're talking about them in a good light, though, because I mean, secretly I'm a Nintendo fanboy. But that's a story for a later day. So, these sandbox games do have stories that are technically linear, but when you can do the next mission at any time after just doing nothing for 12 hours in game, it kind of loses its impact, and that's a problem, because if your story means nothing, then your game, well, I guess your game doesn't necessarily mean nothing. Because, obviously, you can make games without story, considering that one of my most played games on Steam right now is Adventure Capitalist. We definitely need to make an episode about idle games. See, and this is the first episode, so everything I'm mentioning that I'm like, we need to do an episode on this, I'm actually going to write down, and we're going to do an episode on it eventually.
Yeah, eventually.
Whatever
that means.
Whenever we run out of items in the stack. So, I think we need to get back to examples, because obviously our biggest talking point is a recent example of a sandbox game that you might be able to predict is why we're talking about this. Or again, since we stole this topic from Jim Sterling, if you've seen his video about the Big Empty Sandbox, then you probably know exactly what our final point is. But we're going to save that for a little bit later.
I can't really think of any other sandbox-style games, because I haven't played that many, actually.
I mean, that's true.
No, I wouldn't consider online games sandbox, would you?
Well, it depends what game.
I mean, the only one that I know I played somewhat was the DCU Online.
Yes, that is absolutely a big empty sandbox.
Yeah.
Because there are randomly occurring missions that are exactly the same as randomly occurring missions. And we could also talk about how randomness does not necessarily make your game less predictable. Oh, that's right. We do have another linear story from 2016. We're going to be talking about it during our episode about Kickstarted successors.
Oh, jeez, no.
Okay, stop.
Sorry.
So, I'm going to try to think of another good example of a sandbox game. And
Mirror's Edge Catalyst?
No!
No as in not sandbox, or no as in not good game?
It is a terrible sandbox game. It is sandbox for no other reason than because that's how games are these days. And really, if you look at its original, it works so much better as a linear story because they can actually tell the story they want with the characters they want in the order they want. But there's just so much stupid in the way, and I don't understand why it's... I'm mostly mad because I bought that game on the first day that it launched. And I haven't... Well, no, I beat it, except... You may have noticed that I was about to say that I haven't beaten it, because I'm not sure, because there's so many side missions that are just everywhere. There's more stuff on the map now than there was when I beat the game. And that's insane. And none of it is fun. Like, I don't want to spend hours perfecting a run that I have to make in a minute and a half. I want to make a single run in like 5 minutes, and then get a cutscene of the story, and then do another run, because that's how Mirror's Edge is supposed to be. And really, this is just me being a fanboy of the original, and being mad that it's different, therefore ruined, except in this case it actually is ruined, because they still tried to tell the same linear story, except they made it sandbox.
And here I'm thinking you're just being a cynic.
I mean, I am, but that doesn't inherently make me wrong.
I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just saying you sound like a freaking cynic.
Oh man. Okay. I think it's time to stop stalling. Let's talk about Hello Games and their beautiful magnum opus that is No Man's Sky. Oh boy.
Box of disappointment, I heard.
Yeah.
And kind of seen once.
Yeah. Yeah, once for about 10 minutes, because that's all the longer we can play it before our frickin' PS4 crashes, because this game is so poorly made that... Okay, we're not going to get mad about programming right now, because that's not what this show is about. This show is about talking about why games are terrible these days, and why it was better when we were kids.
Oh, so much
That was
better.
a joke, by the way, for anyone who wasn't sure. So I've played, I want to say like 5 hours of No Man's Sky, and it has crashed on me as many times. And it's not like I lose a lot of data every time I crash. It's just that I've been playing it for like 5 hours, and I saw everything there was to play in about half an hour, and I didn't realize it for another 3 hours. And that is just the ultimate end point of this big empty sandbox concept, because there's just nothing in this game. And granted, they've patched in a little bit more that actually somehow makes it run worse, and I think that's the biggest disappointment of it all. But
it's hilarious.
Yeah, for you maybe. I paid $60.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I must rephrase that. That is horrible.
Well, yes, that's why we're doing an episode that we just made half an hour worth of conversation to get to a point where I'm yelling about No Man's Sky because it's so bad.
Calm
Anyway.
down. We don't have a swear jar yet.
I mean, I'm not going to.
Okay.
I'm not going to get that mad, but
Okay.
I am annoyed that there's really nothing to it. It's... Other than the first planet, there is no variation between anything. So, just to point that out, let me just talk to all the No Man's Sky players in the audience. Let me know if you heard this one before. You go to the planet so that you can get some starship fuel, so that you can get to the space station more easily, so that you can buy the materials to create hyperfuel. And then you go to the next solar system. Yeah? Sound familiar? That's literally the entire game. And it takes probably hundreds of hours to beat this game, and the ending is quite infamous as being the actual biggest disappointment in all of 2016 gaming. Well, I guess I can't say that. I didn't play very many games that came out in 2016. Like, 2... Oh no, there's new in 2016. Oh man, I actually forgot how many of our games came out in 2016. Just kidding. I have played a lot of 2016 games. But for me, that was just... Granted, I didn't reach the ending on my own. I saw it in a video of someone who presumably had also once been excited to play No Man's Sky.
I mean, wasn't it advertised as this great big revival of the Sandbox?
Yeah, it was advertised as just like this great big sandbox with tons of variation, and there would be player-to-player interaction, which was a lie. And, of course, we're going to talk about developer meltdowns at some point in the future, and, oh, Hello Games did a wonderful job. I wouldn't necessarily say that they melted down, but they certainly lied a lot.
Right through their teeth.
Well, yeah.
And a couple other places, too.
True.
So, just big hype and not delivering on it.
Yeah, and it...
For a Sandbox game, that I'm pretty sure that's just the biggest no-no you could ever do.
Although I will say it technically does have a linear story, and that literally the story is, it is your goal to get to the center of the galaxy, and then the game literally draws a line for you. So yes, it does have a linear story. But not a good story at all. See, I watched a lot of the marketing, and it made me think that this was going to be a really good game, because it had things like alien languages, which I'm a big fan of foreign languages, so I thought that would be pretty fun for me, just going around learning alien languages in a game, because they made several, well, I won't say complete languages, but they did do a lot of translation, and I think they have like 6 languages or something. I don't know. But it's spread out enough that it's completely pointless. And, of course, there's other big issues, like how there wasn't player-to-player interaction, and, of course, no one mentioned in the lead-up to No Man's Sky that it doesn't really have anything fun about it. It's like Minecraft if Minecraft lasted you 20 minutes, and there were like 4 resources, and once you collected enough of all 4 resources, you could just do nothing. Because that's really what the goal is. The goal of No Man's Sky is to do nothing. Your goal is to fly through space and get to a point where you do nothing.
Fly through space. Do nothing. Profit.
Oh, if only. No, if you want a game like that, play Elite Dangerous, which... Elite Dangerous is like No Man's Sky if it had been less terrible. And we may end up talking more about Elite Dangerous at some other point. If not, check it out. Check it out anyway, it's a really fun game. So, I'm kind of wondering now if, after No Man's Sky release, we're going to see less Sandbox games. Because it sort of took it to its logical conclusion, and it kind of made me want to not play Sandbox games anymore. Because there's other types of games that are just as engaging. As I mentioned earlier, Adventure Capitalist is one of my favorites. And I will say this for Adventure Capitalist. While there's very little gameplay, at least the gameplay is engaging all the way through. It only takes you about 10 minutes to see everything the game has to offer, but that doesn't necessarily make it boring after that 10 minutes, which is more than I can say for No Man's Sky, where randomization really crippled the game. I know that probably seemed like a weird transition, because it was. I want to talk about randomization at some later point, and why it can be used well and often is not, but the general point of that is just because everything is randomized doesn't mean that you won't get the same number 4 times in a row. Since most things in No Man's Sky are randomized, well, I say randomized, it's actually procedurally generated, and the difference between the two is there isn't a difference. Well, that's not true. Procedural generation is done in a way that it's persistent, whereas randomization would be continuously changing, and that would probably put a damper on things in games like No Man's Sky. And a much better version of No Man's Sky, Minecraft. I guess my point with comparing No Man's Sky to other games is if you want to play No Man's Sky but don't want to be bored out of your mind, play Elite Dangerous or Minecraft or both. Do not play No Man's Sky. Do not give them any more money than they already have. They do not deserve it. I think I scared Alex a little bit there.
I'm pretty sure this is where we draw to our logical conclusion, unless you say otherwise.
Yeah, no. I've been sort of just saying the same things continuously, because in case you hadn't figured this out, and I know it's a really shocking fact, I hate No Man's Sky with a burning passion, and I hate everyone who works at Hello Games. That's not true. I mostly just hate Sean Murray. He sucks. And I would say that to his face. In fact...
Even if he was dying?
Oh, yeah.
I
would only feel a little bit bad, but then I would remember that he killed Sandbox Gaming.
Just let those be the last words he hears. Just leaning real close, right next to his ear.
You killed Sandbox Gaming. I hate you.